Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, and that's Sanford Hess. This is Real Reviews Rewind, the show where we rewind the clock a little bit and look at films from the past, and sometimes other stuff, but mostly films from the past. This week, we're going to be talking about two films. The first of which is The Killing Fields, starring Sam Waterston and Hang Nor. So this film is a very unique look, in my mind, at journalism and humanity as a whole. Sanford, why is that?
It's because it takes us into the inner life of a journalist who, not just that he's reporting on something, but that he comes to have a personal attachment to what's going on, which is embodied by Hang Nor, who plays his interpreter slash photographer slash do everything for him person. And that becomes the emotional crux of the film.
So, I will make a full confession. I did not get all the way through this film. The reasons of which are pretty basic.
Well, hang on. Before we do that, let's talk about the movie as sort of an overview.
Okay.
And then we'll circle back to that. So
okay.
I will talk about the movie.
Okay.
If you wish.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So this movie is set in Cambodia. And the movie starts in around 1972, and the events transpire over about the next 3 years. And what's important to note is that Cambodia, next to Vietnam, has a sort of a sideways impact from the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of violence that was going on in Cambodia, and eventually, actually, what happened was there was a revolution within Cambodia, also similar to Vietnam, and the Khmer Rouge, which was the rebellion in Cambodia, winds up near the beginning of the movie, essentially wins the war. Yeah. And the establishment leaves Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia. So the movie starts, and we're in the midst of this. Mm-hmm. And we are following our journalist, Sam Waterston, who is, and this is a true story. I think that's key to note. So the movie takes us through the sort of fall of Phnom Penh. I'm probably saying that wrong. Mm-hmm. And we transpire through those events. And then the middle part of the movie is set within the French embassy, where they have retreated into due to the fact that they can't leave the embassy. And these are all the remaining foreigners are there, including, however, is his photographer, who... this becomes sort of the problem of the film, is that his photographer is Cambodian, should not be within the embassy. He actually needs to be exported out or something. So anyway, mm-hmm. the last third of the movie is his saga. First, he is captured, and he's put in a re-education camp. And then the last part of the movie, not to give too much away, mm-hmm. is his fleeing from that camp and making his way back out and hopefully to freedom. So it's a powerful story. The events are real. The people are real. It is based on the journalist's account of all this. I did read that they sort of improvised a lot of the dialogue, but mm-hmm. that the events of the movie are legit.
Okay, so now having said that, the takeover in Phnom Penh, I got through pretty much all of that, and I got to the part where he helps his family escape, but doesn't go himself.
Right. Because
he realizes the journalists need support and need somebody to translate, among other things. Also, we should mention John Malkovich is in this movie.
John Malkovich plays a photographer who is associated with Sam Waterston.
And
kind of a little bit of a...
Comic relief?
Exactly, I was going to use the same words. A little comic relief part. He was good in it. I thought he kind of brought a little crazy.
Yeah, he brought a little more nuts than Craig T. Nelson did as the sergeant who wouldn't help worth the darn either.
Yeah.
My issue with this film is not its story, although you are, if you don't know the events, kind of just thrown into it, which is one main detractor for the film for me, is that, without any context, you're just thrown into this event in this situation, in this narrative.
Right.
But that's not really what is the most off-putting thing, because you kind of just transition from day to day to day to day without there being any cohesive through line to really help you understand what's happening between each day. That's the start of my problem,
Yeah.
but the crux of my problem happens to be the violence. And as true as the story is, seeing, loss of limbs, seeing doctors operate on people, seeing, the lack of compassion some of these freedom fighters had for other people, it ripped my soul apart, man. I don't know what to tell you other than that. It just ripped me in two, having to watch all this death and destruction based on, this, I guess I can call it, this secondary Vietnam going on in Cambodia.
Right.
Like...
But, okay, so let's pause for a second, talk about that, because here a movie is making you feel so strongly that you actually are having a physical reaction to watching this movie to the point that you say, this is too much. I mean, isn't that the power of film?
It is, in a sense, the power of film, which is why when I called you and I was like, I don't know if I want to discuss this because I didn't finish it, he's like, yes, we should discuss it. And for me, it is important to discuss this film because these are the types of stories that aren't told in Hollywood anymore, and they need to be told.
Right. Yeah, let me say that. I mean, historically, when this movie came out in the mid-'80s, it was only 10 years after these events. But the events were not widely known. So this, the book that this was based on and then the movie itself went a huge way towards publicizing the atrocities. I mean, 2 million people were killed within the country. It wasn't even, they were killed simply by the policies of the new government. And this was not widely known. And this movie, is incredibly difficult to watch. The subject matter is heavy, heavy, heavy stuff. But its message is this story needs to be known, and it is giving it in a Hollywood way that we can understand and follow along with. Although, going back to your point about being off-putting, something that struck me right away is lots of this movie is either in Cambodian or French with no subtitles, which I saw as a strategic choice that sort of puts you in the place of the Americans in this situation who don't really understand what everybody's saying either.
Agreed.
But it makes it more difficult to watch.
It makes it more difficult to watch, especially when you get to points of suffering. And I love Sam Waterston as an actor. And since I didn't finish the film, I only got to see the part where he was basically... He wasn't quite an a-hole who just wanted to get the story. He was just below that, which is hard to say. He wanted to get the job done, but he wasn't dispassionate. But his coldness made me pay attention to his photographer more, and more to the people of that country at that time. So I was not even a man in the American shoes. I was a man in the Cambodian man's shoes, watching these atrocities, wondering if I was in a situation, what are my brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, family and friends feeling at this moment? Because they come by quite a few explosions.
Yes.
They're very near to that. They have to witness executions occurring and wondering if they're next. And that intensity and that tight thread that the movie leaves you on most of the time is what keeps you engaged. But the beginning is such a slow entry that you're just wondering, okay, what are we doing here? And none of it's really brought to you until you get to the point when those atrocities are happening directly in front of your face.
Right.
And if you have a TV that's 55 inches or bigger, watching that makes you just want to hold a baby and tell them it's going to be all right every single day of your life, because you're witnessing all this death and lack of humane compassion for your fellow man or woman.
Now, did you see the part with sort of the fall of the city where the tanks roll in?
The beginnings of that, yes. Okay. And where they're captured, well, I guess not captured, but just taken away, but it looks like they're captured.
Yeah. I think pause for a moment there, and I really appreciate the direction, the production capabilities. This movie truly feels like you were thrown in the middle of a war.
It is massive.
And
the sets are massive.
The sets are massive. Extras and, I mean, a lot of the violence and the the scenes after a bombing and things like that, staging those must be incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
I read also that they used a lot of actual Cambodian refugees who had fled to Thailand. They filmed this in Thailand and filmed it with a lot of Cambodian people, playing people on both sides of the battle. Wow, these scenes are amazing.
Yeah. And these extras are amazing.
Yeah.
Like every moment you see an extra on screen, it's heart-wrenching.
Yeah. And these people have truly been through this for the most part.
Yeah.
So they really are coming at it, and I mean even the kids, even the kids in the scenes break your heart.
The kids especially.
Yeah. And then I'll just say there are some later scenes in the movie where the gore, the dead bodies, which, I mean, that's their point, just to expose to you the sort of sheer number of people who are killed. I mean, all I can say is those, and actually, those sets must have been just, they're not even sets, I mean, they're filmed outside, but staging these scenes with all these dead bodies must have been horrendously difficult. It's not just people laying there. They actually must have fabricated this stuff. And it's tough.
It's heart-wrenching.
It's tough to watch. Now, I will say this. You mentioned you like Sam Waterston in some other movies. I didn't really care for him so much in this movie.
Again, he was cold-hearted, so I was just like, eh.
He's cold-hearted. The movie, the second half of the movie does deal a lot with his guilt. And, what you expressed is exactly kind of what he verbalizes is, was I selfishly searching for the story so much that he blames himself for the death of his photographer, who may or may not be dead.
Yeah.
But he blames himself for that. And later, John Malkovich shows up and sort of specifically voices that at him. And there's a sort of scene between them. But at the same time, I didn't really buy him as this character. I felt like he's taking advantage by far, and I didn't like. I just don't. I just don't like this idea of the sort of Cambodian lackey, for want of a better word, who's his driver and his translator.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the guy's got a family with 5 kids, but he's at Sam Waterston's beck and call. He's up late with him. I mean, I just think about, I mean. This is an American taking advantage of a situation with other people, clearly, and I guess that's kind of the point, but it led me to not really like his performance in this. And I don't know if it's not liking the character or not liking the performance. I'll be honest.
Okay, I'm going to flip something that you said to me onto you now.
All right.
Isn't the point of that character to make you feel something, whether it be good or bad?
True.
And even though I really dislike Waterston's character, I think he played it well enough for me to say it was a strong performance. Definitely not as strong as his later work, and of course I'm referring to his time on Law and Order, where he really gets to go complete ham and be the exact opposite entirely of this character.
Yeah.
Somebody who cares about everything and everyone and wants justice for all.
So that's a valid point, but I will say this. I remember being struck by, and I think it was one of the scenes in the embassy, where he's acting in a scene with John Malkovich and with his photographer, and his line reading, his actual delivery of the line was so bad. It just sounded like a sour note in a musical performance.
Most of his lines do. They sound basically like a journalist.
No, this was beyond that.
Okay.
Just struck me in the sense of, ugh. Also, actually, by the way, speaking of music, the music at times in this movie was too much in the foreground and too out there for the scenes they were showing. I really didn't care as much.
Especially, I'm going to point this out, especially during transitions.
Yeah.
You're transitioning from one day to another, and all of a sudden you hear this, and it's just like, but we're in a movie where people are being destroyed and massacred, and there's a lack of humanity. I feel like that's product of the 80s. I feel like they need to make you hear more of what you're seeing than they do allowing you to see it.
Yeah.
And so I can understand your point there.
But also as a product of the 80s, there were scenes in this movie that went on for a long time with just dialogue, and that's something you would never see in today's movies. So that was a good thing. I mean, I really appreciated there are scenes that had space, they had time. The movie's long. It's about 2:20 or so, 2:15, 2:20. But at the same time, I wouldn't have cut any of those scenes down. I felt like they, especially the embassy part in the middle, was a sort of strange break because, I mean, time really slowed down in that part compared to the beginning of the movie and then the last sort of third of the movie, which goes much faster through the timeline.
When any of the parts, well, specifically I'm referring to when they're originally, they're captured and then freed, because of course they get that embassy amnesty.
Right.
That's where the pace kind of picks up because they're like, well, there's nowhere to use the bathroom, so how do you handle that? And it's like, oh, that's interesting. You're learning about the laws of that country and what it's like to be jailed in that part of the culture. And that stuff I was fascinated by.
Yeah.
But again, it didn't dull the pain of watching, hundreds upon hundreds of individuals die horrific deaths or nearly escape the country while it was becoming war-torn.
Right, right.
So in the end, did you even like this movie? Because
likes the probably not the word I would use. I first of all, I was really glad I saw this movie. I had recently there's the Vietnam War series on PBS, and I didn't watch that.
The Ken Burns one?
Yeah, but I listened to the book, so I sort of listened to this history of Vietnam, and the visuals in this movie do an excellent job at showing you sort of what that chaos was like. So I appreciated that somebody had taken the time to bring this to the screen. I feel like I learned a lot about this story, and it's a story worth telling. I would recommend it for people who either want, number one, an interesting film to watch, or number two, to learn more about the sort of Cambodian side of this discussion, as opposed to where we sort of know a lot about Vietnam, but Cambodia had an entirely different history through this time.
Yes.
But I would not say that it would be it's not a popcorn movie.
Definitely not.
Do you like this movie?
I have to ask myself if I could, if a few weeks passed, would I go back to it again and try and finish it?
I hope so. I hope you do, because ultimately it is a story of triumph.
I would just to get to the point of where things get to the point where the main character, the journalist, humanizes himself from all of his American exceptionalism.
Right. Right.
So I will eventually finish it. I don't know when. I think I need to breathe from it for a little bit.
Why did you choose it for us to watch?
Honestly, it was recommended to me by my ex-girlfriend. She had brought it from a professor and said, let's watch this. And I was like, it's late, but oh, okay, I'll give it a shot. And we started watching it at about 9 in the evening. And by 10:15 or so, I was just like, oh, I can't. I'm crying now. It's gotten too much.
Right.
I can't. So we had to stop, and she was gonna bring it back the following week, but scheduling became an issue, so we didn't get to finish it.
Okay.
We will, however, finish it. I think she finished it at some point when she was visiting, but I have not finished it, but I will. And while we have a little time left, I wanted to talk about one other movie in honor of St. Patrick's Day happening this Saturday, I believe. Is that?
What? Yes, St. Patrick's is Saturday. What's the movie?
Brigadoon.
Yes.
And that film stars Gene Kelly and Sid Charisse. The film is pretty interesting. Pretty interesting setup for the film. So imagine this: you're on a hunting trip in Scotland, and you're I guess murdering birds and ducks and all sorts of things.
Sure.
And while you're lost on that hunting trip, you see a mist, and for some strange reason, you decide to go toward it. they go towards this miss, Gene Kelly and his best friend, and they end up in a village called Brigadoon, where, wouldn't you know it, a wedding is taking place. And at the wedding, because they're foreigners but they're somehow invited, Gene Kelly meets Sid Charise's character and learns about the townspeople and learns about the lore of this place called Brigadoon, which is, it's a one-day only town, and somehow he manages to fall in love with one of the young women there. His best friend does as well, but learning the one-day rules, like, nope, I don't want to stay. But Gene Kelly is convinced that he should stay because he loves this woman, and I believe, if I'm remembering this detail right, he gets into an argument with the girl, the best friend gets into an argument with the girl he's in love with, and is out sulking around and accidentally shoots and kills one of the villagers.
Well, there's a little more to it than that.
What did I miss? I'm missing something, and I can't.
So it's a one-day town in the sense that they were cursed. Here we're just going to go. The movie's 60 years old, so we're just going to give away the whole thing.
Yeah.
They were cursed such that every night when they go to bed, 100 years go by. That was the curse.
Right.
And then, here Gene Kelly and his friends show up, and the question, oh my gosh, they learn about the story. When was that? Oh, 2 days ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is day 2 of the curse.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that none of the villagers actually seemed bothered by the curse.
No, they're like, oh, okay, this is what it is.
Yeah. So they've moved on mentally. Gene Kelly and his friend, they don't really know what the story will be if they're going to stay. Now, what happens with the other guy is, apparently part of the curse is if anybody from the village leaves over the bridge or
then
sort of leaves the boundary, then everybody, well, they don't really know what's going to happen. But
they think they're going to die. They think the whole village is just going to not exist.
Right. So the guy who was in love with the woman who's getting married, who's not Gene Kelly's love interest.
No, the best friend.
Right. No, we're not the best friends. Just the 2 people getting married.
Yes.
There's a sort of another guy who's jealous of that. He's the one who leaves,
right,
or tries to leave. Mm-hmm. And then Gene Kelly's friend, hey, it's an American with a gun, right? So he accidentally shoots him.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, whoops, sorry.
So he actually, that helps everybody. I love how they kind of play that down.
Yeah.
Yes, and but Gene Kelly ultimately and his friend do not stay.
No, they do not. They go back to New York, I believe it is.
They go back to New York, which leads to actually probably my favorite scene in the movie, which is Gene Kelly is now back in New York, and he's sitting with his fiancée from before.
And he's just like, I want to be...
And is mentally just completely 2,000 miles away.
Yeah.
2,000 miles and 100 years away. I guess, because of, which I just thought was great. I mean, I thought that was that scene, for whatever reason, I really enjoyed that scene.
It's a beautiful, beautiful scene that really showcases not only Gene Kelly's acting skills, but I like to call Gene Kelly the man that can fall in love with anybody. Because literally, and he can fall in love with anybody, and you'll believe it. Yeah. Oh, Sid Charisse in Brigadoon, you can believe that. Oh, Debbie Reynolds in Singing in the Rain, you can believe that. The girl from American in Paris, you can believe that. He's so likable that it's almost like eating a really great lollipop. You enjoy the sickly sweetness of it, but also you're never really bored of it because you rarely get to see a star shine so brightly in terms of romantic love interest. Like nowadays, if you had the same movie, it would fail massively.
Yes, this movie does not hold up well.
No, it doesn't. And I think that's part of the fun, is that we know it doesn't hold up well, but it's still an engaging watch, at least in my opinion.
Not so much in mine.
Okay, tell me why.
I'm not a fan of musicals, and this movie is an example of the kind of musicals I'm not a fan of.
Okay. How is it an example of musicals you're not a fan of?
The dancing and singing scenes were just
But that's
cheesy.
The whole purpose of the... That's the whole purpose of the movie, though.
Well, it was a stage show. So they did, I mean, I'm not going to say that they created all this whole cloth.
Yeah.
But I mean, for example, Singing in the Rain, okay?
Yeah.
Singing in the Rain to me is a more enjoyable movie than this one. Still not really my kind of movie, but
Okay.
it's more enjoyable because the dancing scenes are so much more interesting. And there's a lot of great choreography. This movie, the choreography was kind of boring. I mean, essentially the song. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The songs with the village people. That sounded wrong. Not the village people as in the group from the 70s. The people of Brigadoon. The dancing scenes with them. Oh my God. It's just like, it felt like you were watching a bad high school production of a musical of like Brigadoon.
Yeah. I will say this to you. This film is crowded. Crowded with so many different relationships that you have to follow and understand. The only real pure moments are the moments when Gene Kelly is in love, where you can be like, that's nice. And he's on the road by himself thinking about how amazing this girl is. And he starts singing, what a day this has been, what a swell mood I'm in. Why, it's almost like being in love. It feels schmaltzy and very American songbook. And you're just like, that relaxes me. But then you go back to the crazy villagers who are like, go home, go home, go home to Bonnie Jean. Go home, go home. And they hold it forever. Go home to Bonnie Jean. And it's just like, it's too bizarre for words. But for some reason, some unearthly reason, I find the whole thing pleasurable, probably because I enjoy watching Gene Kelly just do his thing. I don't think it's the movie or the narrative as a whole. I think it's just Gene Kelly and his connection with Sid Charisse and how they work together rather than the whole village doing their thing.
Right.
Because I didn't connect with anybody else in that film. Not his best friend, not the guy who was marrying not the girl who was marrying the school teacher, not the school teacher himself. None of that.
Right.
Just Gene and Sid. And I think this is what would illustrate what is bad about musicals when you don't do it properly. But there's also kind of an Irish kind of tint to it, which is why I chose it for St. Patrick's Day weekend.
Even though it's Scotland.
Even though it's Scotland.
Okay.
Even though it's Scotland. So, what would you improve upon with this movie? I want to ask that
Well,
question.
I guess,
I'm curious now.
To go back to, now, an American in Paris has more sort of straight up crazy staging with the sort of sets and stuff like that. I mean, this movie probably could have gone that direction and just done more production numbers.
Yeah.
Or, I like your point, it's too crowded. So, I mentioned Singing in the Rain, which has a lot of scenes with sort of 3 people or 2 people or 1 person. Mm-hmm. Maybe more of that.
Mm-hmm. But how would you make that interesting when they're in... Maybe show more of the neighborhoods of Brigadoon, I guess. That would be a thing.
Sure, or just... I think that they dedicate... I mean, you mentioned his friend. I really didn't care for his character either. I mean,
Nope.
I think they gave him too much screen time.
Oh, definitely.
So yeah, they could have made us care about more of the characters in this movie. I did, one of the ones I liked Sid Charisse's movie, her song at the beginning, about how I'm just gonna, one of these days, some guy's gonna walk right up and I'm gonna fall in love. I can't sing it like you.
No.
But, that, she sings that whole song about that, and then, of course, right next to her, you kind of see is Gene Kelly.
Enter Gene. Hi there. Yeah. Is it a fun movie? No. Is it a slow movie? Not really. I feel like it's well paced.
It was brisk.
But it's not enjoyable, and I don't know if it ever will be. I just find it one of those odd musicals that didn't jive with me, and I'm a fan. You're not a fan and it didn't jive with you, so I can totally get why. But overall, for this week for Real Reviews Rewind, it's been an interesting week in film.
Yeah.
The next time we meet, we'll be talking about something completely different. I don't know what that is yet. We haven't set our program, but when we do, we'll be back here. Same bat time, bat channel. That is Sanford Hess. I am Chike Coleman, and we will see you guys at the movies. Bye, guys.